the Ministry of Education, which is the policy implementer, has not had such discussions when it comes to a review. Of course, I have just listened to what you played about a possible review of the Director General for the Ghana Education Service, and from the understanding I have, is an analogy he was creating. I mean, you and I know that when it comes to policy decisions, it has more to do with the president or the ministry or the minister. Of course, I mean, beyond that, you may have some other agencies that are helping with the implementation of the policy. But when it comes to the policy decision, it is the prerogative of the president of the land, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and the minister, Dr. Yose Educhum, and that conversation has not come up. So I just want to say that when that conversation comes up, probably we may look at it, then all consequential decisions, we may discuss it as a people. But for now, SHS is not under any review, especially within the context of the review that it was placed, where we are saying that parents are going to pay a amount or that amount. That discussion, we've not had it as a ministry.
Well, so that's the position of the ministry on the matter. You heard Kwesi Kwarteng, who speaks for the ministry. But there have been calls for a review of the NPP's flagship program. In recent times, the shortage of food in senior high schools across the country have triggered once more the debate about the free senior high school program, with some parents calling for the program to be scrapped.
We no longer collect dues because we're using the students as agents. So that if they are not paying, we ask them to go home so that they go and collect the dues for us. Currently, per government policy, we cannot ask any child to go home to collect PTA dues. So it has become voluntary, and the parents are not paying.
Our children are very hungry. They wrote the exams on empty stomach. Really? They give them, yes, they give them just a ladle without even groundnut, without bread, a ladle of cocoa without sometimes no sugar. And when the headmistress say they'll victimize them, what kind of system is this? Why? And if the child at the center of education is suffering, then what are we doing to our children? We are gradually teaching these children how to teach, because a hungry man, you know what bonus.
1 man 1,000. One that they sell, that's long one that they sell like 10 cedis or so. They give it to 10 students to share. But the moment you talk about it, you will be victimized. So everybody is quiet.
And you had the concern of some parents on the controversial subject of the free senior high school policy. In the last 15 minutes, has any other development unfolded which may lead to a possible review of the free senior high school policy? Joining me once more is spokesperson for the Ministry of Education, Kwesi Kwarteng. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. So the GES Director General, as we understand, in very clear terms, says the review is underway. Is this response that we're getting from the ministry now an afterthought?
Okay, a very good evening to you and to your listeners. As you are rightly aware, free SHS is a policy initiative, and every policy obviously has a policy implementer and the regulator of the policy. Often at times and in many situations, it is the regulator of the policy who inadvertently gave birth to the policy. And so all the policy decisions ought and likely has to be made by the person who gave birth to the policy. And so, I mean, generally, when you look at policy decisions, it's likely made by either the executive, who happens to be, in this case, the president of the land, or the Minister for Education, Dr. Yose Educhum. Within the context of the conversation that we are having, and of course, I mean, I have spoken to Professor Opoku-Abankwa, the Director General for Ghana Education Service. It appears, I mean, two things: either his intentions did not come out clearly, or clearly was misunderstood. Because if you listen to what he said, I mean, especially within that proper context, referencing the question that was asked, the premise of his conversation, up to where he ended, and not necessarily just part of the conversation that has just been played to all of us. The full conversation, if you want to put that in that proper perspective or that proper context, you will get to know that he was not making an emphatic statement as to the reviewing of the policy. By and large, ultimately, when it comes to reviews and policies decisions, clearly it comes from the executive. And so I have spoken to him. I wanted more clarification on what he said. The clarification that I have, of course, I'm sure a lot of Ghanaians will also align with the same thoughts, especially if you listen or watch the full interview and know the context within which he said that. You will get to know that he was only drawing an analogy. But I understand. It's fair to draw such inferences, especially if you play only the last bit of the interview. It's very fair, it's natural to have such a conclusion. But largely, speaking from the Ministry of Education and the briefing I have from the Minister for Education, such conversation has not come up. Such discussion has not come to the table of the minister. And at no point has the minister or the ministry engaged any of these agencies or when it comes to that conversation. So yes, that issue has been coming out largely within the public domain, but on the table of the ministry, from the side of government, together with our agencies, that discussion has not come up, and we've not had such consideration on reviewing the policy, especially within the line that the supposed or purported review was showing, that we're reviewing to make parents make a monetary commitment. That discussion has not come to our table. But of course, if in the near future such discussions come up, like the Director General of Education rightly put it, that is a broader conversation for the Ghanaian public. It's a conversation not only for the Ministry of Education, neither is a conversation only for the Ghana Education Service, but the broader public and the entire scope of Ghana that has to make such decision. So yes, that is the current state, and I'm not sure it's an issue of afterthought.
Right.
It is the fact that such discussions have not come up to the table.
And I'm glad that you're pointing to the broader conversation, because we just heard from some parents and also civil society organizations, including Imani Africa, on the need to review the free senior high school policy. Some parents, in fact, are willing to pay for the award. So in this period of austerity where we understand government wants to run an IMF program, don't you think that it's simply right for us to allow the parents to pay something, at least for feeding in schools?
Generally, I do not make policy decisions, and I'm sure this conversation has been going on, these discussions have been coming up, especially where you benchmark the conversation that against the backdrop of IMF. IMF negotiations is just at the corner. I think it's even started, even though it's not been an event, it's a process, and so it has to be progressive. I'm sure when all these discussions comes up, all consequential decisions will be made. But as of now, there is no such discussion, no such inference has even been drawn from the conversations that we have been having as a ministry. We do not have such intention as a government, and the free SHS policy is protected and is immune to a review, especially when that review ought to remove that free component where parents now have to pay. We've not had such.
But Kwesi, in fact, in the spirit of corporate governance, I'm sure that you've been engaging stakeholders on the free senior high school policy. It may be at the heartbeat of the presidency, but there are teething challenges that are affecting the quality of that policy. Have all these issues been brought to bear, and
let me state clearly.
How do you intend to deal with all of them? Yes.
Let me state clearly that beyond the free SHS, and even before the free SHS, a lot of these challenges within the education system even predates free SHS. You can list all of them. start with infrastructure. It predates free SHS. Start with even feeding. I mean, we were in this country, we were on the floor of Parliament. The member of Parliament rose up to say that within the constituency and the region that the secondary school students are not having food. That was before free SHS. You can't talk about quality education, schools under trees, even at the SHS level. You can't talk about access, everything.
But in terms of the magnitude, you agree that we've never seen this kind of shortage before.
That is also simplistic. Because if you are looking at about the magnitude, you should also look at correlate it with the number of students that you are dealing with also now. So obviously the challenges will go higher. If we were dealing with 800,000 students in the past, and currently you are dealing with almost close to 1.5 million students, certainly you don't expect the same challenges. The enrollment has more than doubled. So if we are having 10 challenges in the region, this time around it's possible and it's natural that you're going to get about 18 or 20. So, I mean, you cannot base on that to say that free SHS has occasioned every challenge that we are probably having within the education space, especially at the secondary level. Yes, we are there to fix problems. We are there to consult. We are there to listen to the general public. But the whole communication, the whole PR surrounding the free SHS, as though when you look at, I mean, let's even take the issues item by item. Look at the food issue or the food situation, for instance. Yes, we admit there has been some shortage when it comes to a lot of the selected food items, and occasioned largely by suppliers' unwillingness and inability to supply. Largely because, I mean, this time around, if you look at the arrangement that Buffer Stock has with the suppliers, they supply between 2 to 3 months. They may take their claims and go for their monies so that they will have the capacity to go and supply again. This time around, they are now citing reasons like inflation as devaluing their money, especially if you look at the duration that they have to wait before they get their money. So how do you solve such problems? You solve such a problem by bringing in a bank who will be able to pay the suppliers ahead of time,
right,
while government later reimburses the bank. Such an arrangement has been done by the Minister for Education. So it is not as though the ministry does not appreciate the challenges. We do. It is the more reason why the minister will leave the comfort of his ministry and proceed to Agric and proceed to even NAFCO, which is an agency under the Ministry of Agric, to make such an intervention. So yes, those challenges will be there, but holistically, how we address those challenges is finding solutions to them.
Okay, then.
And not saying that the only way is that let parents pay, and that if you let parents pay, all of a sudden food will be available. All of a sudden, quality will be shot to the skies, and there wouldn't be any problem, and everything will be normal. No, that will be a simplistic analogy.
Let me bring in now, and Kwesi, just to hold the lines for us. Let me bring in now Executive Director for the Africa Education Watch, Kofi Asare, who's also been monitoring the conversation tonight. Kofi, thank you for your time. But first of all, given the back and forth between the GES and the Education Ministry, you agree with me that this cannot just be a simple case of miscommunication, can it?
Well, if they say miscommunication, there's nothing we can say. They are responsible for interpreting their own words. So I think the right person to determine whether it's a miscommunication or it's a slip of tongue is the person who said it, and not us, the recipient, or if you like, the audience. So it's up to them.
Yeah, but on the bigger, and then on the
interpretation, or it's a slip of tongue.
Right, and then on the bigger conversation about the review, government says, well, we're not doing necessarily a review of the free senior high school policy. You think otherwise? Tell us about it.
I appreciate the challenges that government, is going through. I appreciate it. I understand what you call policy fetishism. When political policies like free senior high school, exist, within the policy, it becomes very difficult to engage the policy as a social policy. So we call such policies, fetish policies, because the approach in managing it is political, it's emotional, and that's why it's effective. So we see the free senior high school as a board that shouldn't be. You shouldn't even talk about it. It brings some paranoia And anytime you mention review, it sends spine down the shoulders of the political authority. It is normal when in many countries, it's like NHS in the UK, you understand. So unfortunately, we have one in this country. But for me, I am concerned because we were told that our children were starving in senior high schools. I have a boy at St. Peter's. We knew that they were starving. Now, the reason was that the government was unable to pay suppliers. And this issue started long ago, not now. And government is owing close to 400, depending on who you talk to. The minister confirmed it's now 340 million. That's a huge amount of money. I know suppliers who are owed as far back as October last year. So stakeholders and CSOs engage government. The government, it's obvious that the burden of carrying the entire feeding cost is too much. Your back is breaking. There's no money. There are liquidity issues in this economy. So allow us parents to support you. Government says no. And that they will do it themselves. So parents being there and seeing, obviously, will have to and not listen to government, but then act in respect of what is on the ground. And so for this reason, parent associations started collecting money. I have paid my 300 at St. Peter's. Wesley girls were Joy FM reported, Wesley girls were paying 500 CDs. Even this morning, Mount Carmel in the Kumadan paying 300.
Okay, so your point is that parents should be
So
allowed
my point is that now parents are now contributing to feed their children in senior high school. And this contribution is making an immediate impact on the quality of feeding. There is no more starvation. There is no more cocoa without sugar or without bread. So the objective of parents intervening to prevent their children from starving has been achieved, with or without a review of the free senior high school feeding policy. So what I am saying is that the Ministry of Education should ride on the back of this enthusiasm by parents to support and the payments parents are making to feed their children through the PEs, okay, and develop a framework within which such contributions will be received and accounted for, so that it doesn't lead to duplication. If government is spending 1,000 cedis a year in feeding my ward, and I have paid 500 cedis already through my PE, that's a parent association, to the school, then it means that government should not give the school or food worth 1,000 cedis again, because I paid half. So if you develop a framework, if you take into account all these payments, then the schools are accountable to the money that the parent association are giving to them. Then government is also not overpaying because parents have contributed.
Okay.
Is this too much to ask for?
Right. And I guess that point has been well noted. That's the Executive Director for the Africa Education Watch, Kofi Asare. Kwesi Kwarteng is still with us. So you heard there, Mr. Asare, making the point about how parents are willing to support government. Notwithstanding the conversation about a review, you support such a move that parents come through, support government in this quest to get some food for the school children?
So, government has their part to play. For me, that space for government, the most important thing is that we are able to make sure that government fulfills their obligations and is able to play their part of the agreement, which is providing their consideration in the form of providing food. As I speak to you, yes, there were challenges, but if you go around the country, now every region in the country has received some foodstuffs. And what it translates into, the briefing that I have from the National Buffer Force, is that each school, as of today, has received some food stuffs, which is at least going to take them for some time, and while in the long term they provide also some food.
I'm grateful that you're providing that update. Just want to plead with you to hold on once more. Let's also bring in the Deputy Ranking on the Education Committee in Parliament, Dr. Clement Apak, who also has some comments to pass on the concerns about a review of the free senior high school policy. Dr. Apak, the position of the minority is known. Part of the solution that many point out to, including the finance minister himself in 2018, has got to do with a targeted approach in terms of dealing with a free senior high school policy. You agree with that at this point where, of course, there are challenges facing the policy?
Well, let me say good evening to you and listeners and other panelists. I am glad you said that the position of the NDC is known. We have long called for a holistic review of the policy and now the program since it has been implemented. And our call continues to go on unabated. And our call is predicated on the challenges that we all know are affecting the ability of us as a nation and the beneficiaries of the program to get the full benefit, the full complement of the program. And I have said time and again that the challenges facing the program are not confined to only the matter of food supply in terms of its availability, in terms of the quality and the quantity, as we've been discussing in the past few days with the letters that we have seen from local chapters of the, CHS. But it also has to do still with matters to do with textbooks, their availability, and whether or not every student has access to a core textbook as the program requires the state to provide. Even the issue of space and for both academic and residential. So the challenges continue to be there. And I still cannot understand why government seems adamant and or coy to call a national stakeholders forum for us to review the program with the intent of making it better.
But
the complaints
if it's about
are becoming loud and louder by the day.
But if the concerns are to be taken in the order of priority, it appears that issues of funding should not be on the table. You take a look at the allocation made this year alone to the policy, ranging somewhere around 2.3 billion Ghana cedis. That's like a drop in the ocean comparing the weight of the toll that education allocation is having on the budget. Over 17 billion Ghana cedis is what we are allocating to the entire sector. So why not give more funding, for instance, to the free senior high school policy?
Well, I don't make the budget. I don't make the proposal. In fact, it is the ministry that makes the proposal, which is then captured in the budget and brought to Parliament. And so far, we have not been told that the allocations or the request made has been insufficient to deal with the implementation and financing of the program. So, yes, you are right that this year we approved 2.3 billion for just the free senior high school. Now, that is not a drop in the ocean. If you look at the total budget of the Ministry of Education, the free senior high school allocation is the biggest for any single line item. And in fact, if you were to call my good friend Kofi Asare, Africa Education Watch, or if you were to call Peter Pate from Institute for Educational Studies, they will tell you that since the inception of the free senior high school program, they have gotten the highest chunk of allocation way above and beyond basic and tertiary.
Okay, I get the point
so
you're making.
It is not for a lack of resources.
Right.
We should be talking about the disbursements.
It's unfortunate that time is not on our side. That's the deputy ranking member on the Education Committee in Parliament, Dr. Clement Apak. Kwesi Cutting, you have 10 seconds to make your final point on this.
Yes, so I think the point has been made clear that as of now, there is no such review. The ministry will continue to make sure that the policy benefits the generality of Ghanaians, especially the over more than 500,000 students that have been added.
All right. I'm grateful. That's Kwesi Kwarteng, spokesperson for the Ministry of Education. Earlier, you heard from Kofi Asare with the Africa Education Watch and Deputy Ranking Member on the Education Committee in Parliament, Dr. Clement Pak. And that's it for Top Story, brought to you by Vodafone. My name is Blessed Sugan. Next is Ghana Connect. We're taking a look at that fresh report dealing with corruption in Ghana.